Hello, and welcome back to the Borderlands 2 OpenBLCMM tutorial. My name is Aaron, and today we're going to be actually running our mod to see all of the changes that have taken place, and today we're going to be working with some skills and skill definitions. If you did not watch the Day 0 or Day 1 videos, I highly recommend checking those out so you have a place to reference where you can start off. Now, as you can see, I already have my game loaded and I am at the title screen of the game. It is very important to note that you cannot execute mods any earlier than getting to this screen. The reason is because for hotfixes specifically, you need to be connected to Shift, and Shift only runs when you are at the title screen of the game. There's an SDK mod called Offline Helpers that remedies this issue, but for the purposes of this tutorial series, we aren't going to be covering too many of the SDK mods. Later on in the series, though, we are going to be picking up a couple of SDK mods that do help with our OpenBLCMM experience, but nothing more truncated than that. So last time, we made our change to the Herald by reducing its damage, but we have no way of knowing if the changes were made unless the mod is actually loaded up. So now how do you load the mod, you may ask? Well, that's simple. You can use the tilde key, which is the key right next to 1 on your keyboard, to open up this console window. It may be set different for you in your OpenBLCMM preferences, but by default, the key to open up console is going to be the tilde key. Next, we're going to type the following: exec exec yt.blcmm. And this will execute and run the line of code that we previously had open in BLCMM, but this still doesn't let us know specifically if the Herald's damage was changed or not. So, as I said before, hotfixes only run under certain conditions. When the character is loaded, a specific level is loaded, or in general, when a level is loaded. And previously, we had committed to doing a targeted hotfix format for changing the Herald's damage. So I have built a character. This guy's name is just YouTube Tutorial. He's pretty much a max level character with everything unlocked, but he is just simply a character made for the purposes of this tutorial. And once we get into the game, we are going to open console again by pressing the tilde key. By default, the SDK comes with a function that allows you to see all of the same lines of code in the game that we're able to see in Object Explorer, which is incredibly handy when you are changing or adding some things to the game. So, once we are in console, we are going to go ahead and type the following: obj, short for object, dump, dump, and we are going to go back to our Herald object that we have in OpenBLCMM, and we're going to copy this green object right here, gd underscore wep underscore pistol dot barrel dot pistol underscore barrel underscore torg underscore kala, and we're going to paste that into our console, and then hit enter. The console will then populate with all of the information about that particular object, including the weapon attribute effects that we changed on it. As we scroll up in the console, we can see that number 3 in our array, which we did change previously on the previous video, the weapon damage of the barrel, the base value scale constant, is indeed decreased by -0.2. But we still don't know if the actual damage of the gun is being changed at all. There is a resource tool out there that I do highly recommend if you are doing any sort of modding, and that is called Gibbed. Gibbed basically lets you make items from scratch and import them directly into your game. You can download Gibbed simply by typing into your web browser Borderlands 2 Gibbed Save Editor. So I'm going to go ahead and open Gibbed and load our tutorial character, and I'm going to just save quit the game. Alright, so we are on the main interface here for Gibbed. we are going to select a new weapon from the new weapon tab, and we are going to select base game. We know that the Herald is a base game weapon, so that's the option that we're going to pick. The type of weapon is going to be a Torgue pistol. We know that the Unkempt Herald is a Torgue pistol, so that's the one that we're going to select. For balance, we know that the game calls it the Kala, but it is the Unkempt Herald, so we are going to select Kala. Manufacturer, as we know, is going to be Torgue, so we'll select Torgue. Manufacturer grade is the absolute level that the gun is going to be at, so we are going to make this 90, which is OP10. Body has only one option, so we're just going to select that one option. We're going for perfection. We want an absolutely perfect Herald to compare with later. So we are going to grab Torgue grip. Barrel is only going to have the one option, so we are just going to select that. Sight doesn't matter on pistols, but we are going to keep it all Torgue, so I will choose Torgue sight. Pistols cannot roll with a stock, and Torgue pistols usually cannot roll with an elemental, so we'll leave these as none for now. Accessory is going to be the accessory, or what the community likes to call the prefix of the gun, and we are going to select the laser double accessory. This is going to make the Herald the double penetrating prefix, and it's going to have the ×2 pellets on it, which is going to be the most damage. There are no accessory 2s in the game, so we'll leave that as none. Material is only one option, so we'll leave that as legendary for now. For prefix and title, these do not automatically fill in by themselves, so we need to search for them by ourselves. The easiest way to do that is to go back to Object Manager, or Object Explorer. And so now that we have it open, what we want to do is a get all for weapon name part definition. Once it's done loading, we can see all of the different names of all the different weapon parts. Again, the prefix correlates directly to the name of the gun when it has that particular accessory. So as we scroll down here, we'll see the prefixes here, and we want the prefix that says GD_web pistol .name .prefix Torgue .prefix laser double. We're going to copy that and put that into the prefix tab of Gibbed. And then for the same thing, we need to look for the title of the gun, which we all know is going to be Kala. We did look at it in the day 1 video. We know that it is title_legendary_Kala. And we are going to overwrite that. And then game stage should always be the same as the manufacturer index, so we are going to change that to 90. And then we are going to save, and we are going to go back to Borderlands 2. If you are at the main menu when you are doing Gibbed, you will need to reselect your character, either by clicking select character or by hitting C on your keyboard, then reselecting your character. Then, once we load into the game, we will find our Herald in our inventory, like so. But how do we know that the damage is still what it is and that our changes were applied appropriately? Well, thanks to an internet resource called Loot Lemon, which I will link in the description below as well, you can confirm actual god rolls for weapons in Borderlands 1, 2, Pre-Sequel, 3, and even Wonderlands. Even if you are modding, it is an incredibly useful database to have to compare your rolls to with actual results. So our Herald's damage right now is the following. It is 1,516,185 times 2. But I will pull up a picture here of the god roll listed on Loot Lemon, and that lists the Herald as 2,010,940 times 2, meaning that our negative 0.2 damage did actually work, and we can now confirm that our line of code is indeed working. Now we're going to do something a bit more complex. Since I am loaded up on Axton, I want to change Axton's impact skill to maybe do something a little bit stronger. Let's say I wanted to boost strictly shotgun damage instead of regular gun damage, but I want that damage to be very high, like say 20% per level that I put into impact. Well, we can actually do that very easily. So now we're back in OpenBLCMM. We're ready to start working with Axton's impact skill, but there is a function that I do want to go over that makes mods very clean and easier to read for people who just kind of want to skim through your OpenBLCMM mod, and that is called categories. Categories are just that. They house several different lines of code, and an entire category can be turned on or off, subsequently turning on or off all lines of code in that category. So what we're going to do is we're going to select our root folder, the bright blue one, and then we are going to right click and then create new empty category. A new box appears and it says new category name. You can also hit a combination of Control and then H on your keyboard to also bring up a new category name box. And we are just going to call this one Herald. A new folder that turns orange will pop up here. Orange folders in OpenBLCMM signify that they do not have anything in them and they won't run anything. So to remedy that, we're going to click on our blue line of code that we made, and we're going to drag it into the Herald folder, and then the Herald folder will turn white. Next, we're going to make another category. We're just going to name this one Axton. After that, we're going to make another empty category, and we're going to call this one Impact. Nested categories like this make it much easier to follow and helps keep your mod tidy and organized so that you aren't frantically looking for lines of code that you might have missed. And now we're ready to begin working on Impact. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go back to Object Explorer, and we are going to do a get all on skill definition. There's 561 different objects with skill definition, and as we scroll down here, we get to see a couple of skills that might be familiar to us. We have Assassin skills, Bloodshed Execute, we have Deception. This is obviously Zero's Deception skill. And then we have Grim, Iron Hand, so on and so forth. The coding of the game treats Zero as Assassin. So that's not the character that we're looking for. So we need to keep scrolling down until we find the character that we are looking for. Axton is always referenced as Soldier. And so one of the first skills that pops up for Axton is going to be Able. We're not working with Able at the moment, but we are going to keep scrolling down until we see something called Impact. And this is what we're looking for. If we double click on this object, it will take us to a new screen with all of the details on this specific skill. I will be going over every single line of this object in detail. So something else that I did want to mention is that I did forget to put the size up on the day 1 video. It was left at 12. So I am sorry for that. I have gone ahead and increased back the size back to 18 so that it is kind of easier to read for people who might be on a smaller screen, like a phone, for example, or just they're on a smaller screen and can't read very well. So I do apologize for that. It is back to normal now. As a forewarning, skills are simultaneously kept in the game as a part of a skill tree and not as part of a skill tree. The most common example of this is the Tiny Tina buff drinks that you can acquire. The ones that, increase your defense, the melee damage, gun damage, all of those different buff drinks that you spend iridium on. Those are actually considered skills in the code, but they are not part of a character's skill tree. This is especially important to remember if you are ever doing custom skills in the future for guns, or if you want to change those Tiny Tina drinks, for example, that they do not have to rely on grade rules to function. That is what this line is here. Be subject to grade rules entails. If you are wanting to keep a skill in a skill tree, make sure be subject to grade rules is set to true. B can be toggled off. This boolean here lets you press the action skill key again to stop what you're doing. Some overhaul mods, I'm going to use Azure Lands as an example. Some overhaul mods allow you to stop using a skill periodically, and then you can just switch back and forth from not having that skill to having a skill. Take, for example, BuzzAxe Rampage. In that mod pack, you can freely change if you are going to be in BuzzAxe Rampage or not. Skill effect update interval. Yes, it is spelled wrong. That is mostly not needed. Skill name, pretty self-explanatory. It's the name of the skill, its impact. Skill description is the description of the skill that goes into the actual window of the skill. Self-explanatory. Skill type is the type of skill that the game will run. There are 4 main skill types that are most commonly used in Borderlands 2, and a very easy way to do that, to look at those, is if you click this second underscore line here, and then do a combination of control space, you can actually see there's 6 of them, but 2 are not used. Borderlands 2 doesn't have proficiencies, and max is usually not used in the code. So that leaves us with 4 here. And that's going to be skill type action, skill type action augment, skill type kill, and skill type passive. Skill type action defines your action skill specifically, whether it's Axton's turret, Salvador's gun zerking, or Maya's phase lock. Action augment is a skill that is only run in conjunction with your action skill. For example, Salvador's bus that can't slow down is an augment that only applies his movement speed while he's gun zerking. Wreck is also another good example where the fire rate and gun damage bonuses are actually not applied until you have an enemy phase locked. Skill type kill is pretty self-explanatory, it's a kill skill, and skill type passive is simply a passive effect that applies to the player all the time. Duration type is either going to be infinite or timed, but we'll get into that a little bit more later. Tracked skill type is basically what lets the skill actually appear on the HUD bar right next to your XP level and the level that your character is at. And a tracked skill HUD slot is the numbered slot that that particular skill goes to where it appears on the HUD. In Borderlands 2, this is a maximum of 10, but in the pre-sequel, this can go up to a maximum of 14. Initial duration should only be applied if the skill's duration type is timed. Again, we are going to be looking into that later. And base range is the number of what Unreal Engine likes to call units. They're not necessarily a thing that's similar to meters or yards like we are usually capable of looking at. Units is Unreal Engine's way of determining distance. So we still don't know what specifically constitutes 1 base range or what 2 base range is, like how far that is away from the target or how far that is away from a particular entity. However, most mods that you see that do change this particular integer like to just set it as a default to 4096. So when we get into custom skills later on, we're going to just be changing that to a 4096. And then skill effect definitions is the bread and butter of mostly what we're going to be working on. Skill effect definitions breaks off into a list, as we can see here, with the very first thing being a very familiar attribute to modify equals attribute definition d underscore attributes weapon dot weapon damage. As we know from impact, it increases gun damage and melee damage. So this is what this first line is doing, is increasing the gun damage. B, include dueling targets. We mostly never use that because who's going to be dueling anybody in a mod? Include self as target is basically, should the skill target yourself as the person who's going to be applying the effect. If we look at effect target, we can also see that this is target self. Effect target overwrites this line right here. So even if you have, say, for example, a target self, and then you have this set to false, this will still apply the original effect. And you can change the effect target. If you wanted to affect only allies, you can in fact make a skill only target allies, and allies are going to be every friendly entity, including other players. And then if you wanted to target pets specifically, like Axton's Turret or Death Trap as an example, you can also do a target pets. If you wanted a skill to target enemies, because there's going to be some crazy combinations that we can do later on, you can actually set these to have a target enemies, and then you can assign a range to a particular skill to basically run something that, for example, debuffs an enemy or makes it so that they move less or have less movement speed when you kill an enemy. Some kind of crazy combination like that, we'll get into at a later time. Alright, so modifier value is going to be pretty much the same as we went over before. This is going to be a scale. So we can deduce that this base modifier value of 0.04 is increasing our gun damage by 4% because it is a scale. However, what's different about skill effect definitions versus weapon attribute effects is that there are a couple of new lines stating grade to start applying effect, per grade upgrade interval, and then per grade upgrade. Grade to start applying effect is pretty self-explanatory. When I put a singular point into impact, it immediately grants me the 4% gun damage and 3% melee damage. Per grade upgrade interval is how often it should increase that particular value by grade. So this is set to 1. If this was set to 2, for example, I would not be able to get the effect. If I put 3 points into the skill, I would still only have the 8% gun damage and 6% melee damage, as opposed to, by default, 1 upgrade interval. At 3 out of 5, I would have 12% gun damage and then have the 9% melee damage. And then finally, per grade upgrade does the same thing, which it will say 0.04. That is saying per 1 grade, I get 4% more gun damage. And so we all know at 5 out of 5, Impact grants us 20% gun damage and 15% melee damage. Skill constraints are specific instances where the skill is not active or not running. For the example of impact, the skill constraint is this line here, GD underscore player shared dot skill constraints. If we click on this skill constraint, we can see that it brings up an evaluator that equals vehicle passenger expression evaluator. Basically, what this is saying is if the player is in the passenger seat or the driver's seat of a car, whether it be the runner or the bandit technical, this skill will not apply. Going back, the next list that we have is skill effect presentations. If we click on these, we can see the attribute presentation definition for this skill. And I did click on the one that says number 4 on it. This one looks at the weapon damage attribute, and it prints the weapon damage attribute as gun damage, and then this weird $number $. That's what that is here. This number is the actual number that was defined in our skill effect definitions. All of your attribute definitions inside of an attribute presentation definition must line up with the according attribute. For example, if this weapon damage attribute was instead magazine size or reload speed or accuracy, the skill would not print this line as there's no magazine size attribute inside this skill effect definition. It's only weapon damage and melee damage. We'll take a look more into attribute presentation definitions in a later video, but I did just want to cover the essentials real quick for this particular skill. We have a max grade, which we know is the maximum number of points you can put into a skill. Player level requirement is almost never used. Skill icon is the icon that appears in the skill tree with this skill. Tracked active skill, if you have a subsequent active skill that you want to have proc on this base skill, that is where you'll assign that here. And finally, behavior provider definition is set to none. So now that we've successfully looked at this skill, you're thinking to yourself, well, how are we going to change this gun damage to be shotgun damage instead? So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go to OpenBLCMM's interface. In the folder where we made impact, we're going to insert a new line of code. So as before, when we're making code, the first thing that we want to type is always set. Then we want to copy over our object, which we have as gd underscore soldier underscore skills dot gunpowder dot impact. We go back here, we'll paste that, and then we're going to go ahead and just start with these skill effect definitions. So actually, I'm going to do this a different way. We're going to go and copy this entire skill effect definitions all the way down to the last parenthesis line, like so. And then we'll go back here. And then we're going to get rid of the equal sign here, and that'll be it for right now. So right now, this is boosting global gun damage for all specific types of weapons. So how do we get it to look at shotguns only if we wanted to just look at shotguns? There is actually a set of attributes that also apply strictly to gun types. If we go back to Object Explorer, we can see that we can get these attributes. If we click on Attribute Value Resolver, this folder here, and then if we click on D underscore attributes in our object browser, then follow this folder all the way down to weapon type, you can see once we open this folder that there is actually an attribute that says weapon underscore is underscore shotgun. We're going to copy everything from this line here attribute definition. We're going to copy all of this and then go back to our edit window. And what we're going to do is go back here and stop for right now. Base value constants are a flat integer number that is not conditioned by anything else. So therefore, we can surmise that the weapon damage will always be increased by 4%, no matter what the gun type is. However, we're going to be replacing something particular, and that is the base value attribute field. So we're going to select this and copy over that. So now your base modifier value should look a little bit something like this, but this line doesn't quite look right. So we need to get rid of the space after the attribute definition and put a singular quotation mark around it. And then we need to put a singular one around shotgun. And as you can see, this now turns yellow and makes it look like this one here. So that the game actually knows that it needs to read this as shotgun. Base value attributes and initialization definitions, which we will get into later, overwrite whatever is in the base value constant field. The reason for this is the attribute definition has its own base value constant. So, to put it in layman's terms, how the game reads this is the following. Is the weapon a shotgun? No, make it 0. If yes, make it 1. Because it is only applying that particular effect to shotguns instead of a global value. So, the problem arises is if we leave this base value scale constant the way that it is, it will increase shotgun damage by 100% per level, which is silly. So we're going to change the base value scale constant to this, 0.20, and then put the rest there. You can put all of the leading zeros if you like, but it doesn't matter. But now we have to do the same for the per grade upgrade list. So we're going to go to this last parenthesis mark here. I'm going to copy, and then we're going to paste over this particular one. So now it should say, for every grade that we put into the skill, we're going to get 20% more gun damage. So now we've done it, we've changed impact to boost shotgun damage instead of global gun damage, but we're not quite done with this line of code. We need to hotfix it because we are working with a specific character, and otherwise the skill would not load properly. So we're going to click on the hotfix check mark. A new drop-down will appear with type level. We are going to click this one and select on demand. It does get kind of cut off here, but it does say on demand. This will turn red, which will prompt you to put in a package inside this field. Remember on day 1, where we talked about packages and objects that are contained within them, this is basically what the game is asking for. What you can do is you can click inside this field and then do a control space, and then it will give you a list of the most commonly used packages that you might want to be searching for when it comes to hotfixing. Axton is considered soldier, so we want GD_soldier_streaming, and then click OK. Make sure that this is checked on, and you will see the line of code turns blue because it is a hotfix. Now we're going to save our mod, and then we're going to go back to Borderlands 2. We're going to run our mod again. The easiest way to do this is there is actually a shortcut. Once you open up console and you press the up arrow, you can go back through your most recently used commands. And if you use the down arrow, it will go to your most recent command. So if you press up and then click enter once again, it will automatically execute the mod for you. Alright, so now that we're looking at impact, we see that the gun damage actually doesn't pop up anymore. That's because whenever you input a base value attribute into a base modifier value, like I said before, it overwrites the base value constant. So before, the base value constant was 0.04, which gave the skill card the 4% on gun damage. So now we need to augment this line of code a little bit in order for it to actually function as it was written. So now we're back into this line of code here. We're going to scroll all the way to the bottom of our code here. Towards the second to last parenthesis, we're going to add a comma here, and then we're going to copy everything from that parenthesis to the very first parenthesis of this line here, like so. Then we're going to scroll back down. We're going to enter. We're going to backspace a couple times, and then we're going to paste what we just copied. As an aside here, if your parentheses kind of get out of line like this here, say for example, you can click this button that says auto format, and it will automatically format the parentheses for you so that you always know where your parentheses and indentations are going to be. So, with this new attribute that we're making, it is actually simply going to be a none attribute. So, we're going to highlight all of this, and we're going to type none. In the modding community, this is what we like to call a fake attribute, meaning it does not do anything. It's only used in conjunction with an attribute presentation effect and with more complex skills to get them to all line up properly and display the relevant information. After that, we need to go to the effect target and make it target none. Leave the modifier type as scale, and then we're going to change the base value constants back to 0.2, like so. Then we're going to click OK. The reason we're doing this is the game knows we're changing specifically shotgun damage, but the game can't see if we're physically holding a shotgun in our hands to deduce the 1 versus 0 argument that's happening in the skill. This is a fault of the engine and not the code itself, so don't worry that the skill isn't showing up correctly the first time. All right, and with that, we're going to go ahead and save, and we're going to rerun our mod again. Alright, so even with these changes, it still isn't showing up. So now we have to change the attribute presentation definition in our skill. So going back to Object Explorer, we can see that impact has two different, actually let me find the object here again. We can see that the skill effect presentations has two different attributes that are assigned here. So we're going to change the attribute field in this particular attribute presentation definition, the one that is labeled 4. So let's go ahead and do that now. We're going to go back to OpenBLCMM's interface, and we are going to grab a new line of code. So we're going to hit Insert, then hit Set. We're going to go back to our attribute presentation definition here. We're going to grab everything that is green, and we're going to copy it, and we're going to paste it here. Then we're going to type attribute, and then we're going to type none. None should populate to be blue, and then afterwards we are again going to hotfix this because this is a character specific skill. We need to do the same thing as before, change this to on demand, and then change the package to soldier streaming, and then hit OK. Then you can go ahead and save your mod, and then we'll run it again. So I did also want to make an aside here. Each time you add or change something to your mod, you can re-execute or reload your mod no problem. However, if you delete something from your mod and then re-execute it, what you deleted will still be in the game because those objects are what's called garbage collected, meaning they will be kept in memory until they're completely wiped when you close the game. So anytime you delete something from your mod, you have to full quit out of the game and then reload your game and then reload the mod again. Alright, so now with our fake attribute in place, we can actually see that it increases the gun damage by 20% per grade, but I did say before that we wanted it to only affect shotgun damage. So to make it more transparent to the player, we are going to change the skill description and further augment this attribute presentation definition we did earlier. So let's start with the attribute presentation definition. So we're back in OpenBLCMM, and we're going to click on the line that says, under parenthesis, with Axton, set GD soldier skills, gunpowder, impact, attribute presentation definition 4. We are going to copy and paste this new line. As you can see, this becomes light green, and then this one becomes dark green and italicized. Light green means it is being overwritten by an earlier statement. This commonly happens when you are merging mods together, but since we're going to be changing something very small in this new line, you don't have to worry about that specifically. So we're going to double click on the green line. We're going to get rid of everything after attribute, and we're going to type over, it's going to be description. And now we're going to say, this should be shotgun damage. And then we're going to do the $, number, and then $. This now lets the game know that the presentation is going to say shotgun damage instead of regular gun damage. And so now if we load our mod, like so here, we're going to see that the shotgun damage is going to be primarily affected now instead of regular gun damage. So we'll wait for this to load. And there it is. But the skill description is still wrong. So now we're going to go ahead and change the skill description to say the same thing. We're going to go back to our OpenBLCMM interface. And we know that skill description is going to be in the original object of impact. So, same thing as before. We're going to copy impact. We're going to paste. It is generally good practice to keep objects that are next to each other, that are like the same objects, next to each other for clear conciseness. And so now, we're going to get rid of everything after skill definitions. And we are going to write skill description. And then now going back, we can see in our Object Explorer skill description. We're going to just copy this. Go back to our edit window, and then this pretty much will just need to be replaced with shotgun damage. And then we're going to save our mod, and we are going to run it one last time. And as we look at impact now, it does indeed say increases shotgun damage and melee damage. The shotgun damage is 20%. So we can surmise that it is worked. Of course, in the real world, this skill would be a little bit too busted in conjunction with Legendary Soldier, giving you 200% gun damage, but for the purposes of testing this change to a skill, it is considered a success. So with that, we have changed our first skill. To confirm that it is indeed changed, I am going to go ahead and spawn in a perfect quad using Gibbed. Alright, so I have a perfect Gibbed quad, and I'm going to go ahead and test that the damage actually works by running over to the Sanctuary shooting range over here and testing that the shotgun damage actually does what the shotgun damage is supposed to do. So it is spec to 100% gun damage, and we're just going to shoot the guy in the face, and we get a number of about 12 million damage, which is pretty significant. There are tons of things you can do with custom skills, so it's all down to experimentation and changing how you want them to work. So on the next video, we are going to be changing the Herald a bit and making it into its own custom gun, which will be very exciting. If you like this video, make sure to give it a like, subscribe to the channel to see more videos like this, and ring the bell to be notified of when I post a new video for this tutorial series. Until next time, take care.